was a little study I was doing on generosity, and I better shut that off. And it started, the trouble I had is I started going on these rabbit trails. And, that it just kept leading, I felt like, off subject, and I had to bring it back. But I'm hoping that this all ties in, that everybody can, I enjoyed doing it in the end. I hope it all ties in for you guys as well. But I want to take you on a little journey to start off with this morning. Who has ever been on a inclusive vacation? Like you go somewhere and everything's covered. Anybody? You have? Anybody else? It's kind of cool. And did you pay for yours or did somebody else? You
went to Israel, somebody paid for it.
This is a good example here. I didn't even think about this. But yeah, so say that, you go somewhere, Israel, or I had, the example I had was, say you got invited to an island resort and everything's covered. You don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to pay to get there. All you got to do is show up. And there is just any activity from shuffleboard to skeet shooting, whatever you would like to do is just there, your pleasure, and there's abundance of everything all around you. Okay, you just literally, you want for nothing. You're at this place, and there's a nice group of people there. Someone else is paying for it. The host has provided everything that everybody needs, and you have this amazing gift, and every detail is attended to. You got the little chocolates on your pillow in your room. I mean, every detail has been covered. There is nothing you need. You don't need to worry. And you get there and look around, you think, man, I'm going to have a good time. And, there's a nice crowd, plenty of everything. When the guy walks by with the tray, you're grabbing 3. I mean, it's that nice. And you're not worried. And every time you look around, you think, ooh, look at that over there. I got to go over there and get some of that. I want to go over there and try that. There's an abundance of everything. And after a while, you see somebody walking around talking to people going, wow, man, there's a lot of people here. I wonder if the guy that put this together really thought this many people would show up. I bet you they're going to start running out of stuff. After he talks to more people and more people, pretty soon you notice people maybe doing stuff like they're maybe not at a party anymore, or not on they start doing kind of weird stuff that you really wouldn't do in a setting like this, because somebody's giving you all this stuff. It's a wonderful gift and there's all this stuff around you. And then you see these people like forming little factions, and they start hoarding the trays and not letting people have access to certain things, because we might run out of this stuff over here. And, you might start thinking, man, why are people acting this way? What's going on? Where's the host? He needs to come out and straighten us out. The guy that's putting this on needs to come out and straighten it out. And, people come to talk to you about, hey, man, we're running low. And, you're trying to convince them, hey, it's going to be cool. The host is going to show up and all this. It's really not, it's going to be fine. But nobody's listening. And it might sound a little strange, the little story I put together, but I really think it's a big key in human nature. And that's why I wanted to start off at Genesis 3, because I never really viewed the story from this point of view before. But Genesis 3 and verse 1, we'll start. And obviously this is the garden. And the serpent was more subtle than any beast in the field which the Lord God hath made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Thou shalt not eat of every tree in the garden? Let's think about this for just a moment. So here somebody shows up and they start talking to one of the guests. And they're questioning the host. Now, the snake here is being pretty strategic because he sees all this. He wants to get to the host, but he doesn't know how to get to the host. And he's working through the guest because he wants to change their point of view, but there's all this abundance. The guest doesn't need anything. Yeah, Adam and Eve didn't need anything. They had everything they wanted right there. So he starts this real kind of to undermine the trust in the host a little bit. Indeed, did God really say you can't eat from any of these trees? Is that what he really said? It's kind of questioning in her mind, trying to plant this little seed of doubt. And then when we look on in verses 2 and 3, and the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of any of the trees of the fruit of any of the trees in the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, ye shall not eat of it, neither else ye touch it, yes, ye die. The reply starts out that she corrects him. No, it's quite the opposite. We can eat from any tree, but now there's a possibility out there. See, there's a power of suggestion. And even if it seems absurd a little bit, she said it out loud. And once you get somebody to say something out loud, even though you don't think that America's going to run out of toilet paper, once you get people start saying it out loud, can it really happen? Could it? It doesn't seem like it could, because it's on the shelves in every store you go in. But somebody said it out loud. And now the guest is thinking, is this possible? I guess it could be. I don't know. I got to think about it. So the serpent comes back to the woman in verse 4, and the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. For God knoweth in the day that ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now, convincing the guest that the host is holding back the best. This is really the best. This is the best thing in the garden, and the host don't want you to have it. Because the host is afraid that if you do have it, you're going to end up being more like them. The true intentions of the host now are not good. So at first it was a power of suggestion. Now there's a completely alternative story. This needs to go a different way. You're here and there's all this abundance, but, God told you, you're going to die. You're not going to die if you learn the knowledge of good and evil here. You're not going to die. What's going to happen is you're going to be a lot smarter. You're going to be better off. See, your host that brought you to the resort is really just not wanting you to have what's best. Provided all this great stuff, but it's not. Now there's this decision that she needs to make, and the problem here is to discern good and evil in your own wisdom means you need to know how to define it. And when you don't have a definition for it, there's a lot of decisions to make. Once you cross that bridge, there's a lot of decisions to make. How do you define this? How do you define that? What is truly good? What is truly bad? There's no rules laid out here yet other than this. Don't eat this. That's the only rule. Boy, wouldn't life be simple. It'd be like going to the grocery store. You need mustard, they have one. You ain't got to stand there looking at the rack. They got one. And but there would be no decision to make. So it really, there's problems that go along with this. The snake's holding back, convincing the guest that the host is just not having their best intentions. And in verse 6, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired, to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof and did eat, and also gave it to her husband, and he did eat. So in just 6 verses, that's all it took, we get the full deception package. It's right there that here's these people that had absolutely everything sitting in the middle of abundance that we think we can't imagine. And somebody comes along and makes them think that they need something they don't have. what is it about people? What is it that's in our nature that we have all of this? What I thought was going to start off as a study on generosity has kind of turned into, what it really turned into is what people do with God's generosity. Because it's not what we think. You know, we think, man, going to this island, going to this vacation, all these, you know, it would be really cool. And it would be, very few people get to go on a vacation like that. But then to get there and just get discontented thinking, man, this kind of, they're holding back on me. I'm not getting what everybody else is getting, or I'm not getting this, or I'm not getting that. But the real problem with abundance is our selfishness. And I guess one thing that came to my mind, and I want some opinions on this here. Why did God put the tree in the middle of the garden?
Because the tree of life was right next to it.
Why have them both in the middle of the garden? Why have them together? I get that, but why couldn't the tree of life be in the middle of the garden and the tree of knowledge and good and evil like been in a back corner where you don't walk by it every day, or it's not next to the tree that you need to eat from? Why did it have to be there in the middle of the garden? Why didn't God, if it really, why wasn't it off somewhere? And if you're looking at me like I got an answer, I have an opinion. I don't have an answer, but I just, when I was reading this, I was thinking about that. Why was it in the middle of the garden?
Well, I don't know why that was in the middle of the garden, but I think we know when it comes to choices, sin's never off in a corner, and God always just in the center. Sin and God are always right next to each other. And I think God is trying to test or prove, do you believe me? Because without faith it is impossible to please God. Do you trust me? Or are you going to go off on your own? And if it was hidden off in the boonies, that's not much of a test, because none of life is that way. Wouldn't it be nice if sin were off in the closet?
That's where I want to put it. I'll put it at Bob's house. Okay. It doesn't need to be at my house. I can have all these choices that are bad for me somewhere else that I'm never going to go see. Put it at my sister's house. She doesn't want me to come there. Yeah. I could deal with it being just never entering my mind. Does anybody else have any? No? Just curious. I wrote down a thought, and you might laugh at this based on what Pastor just said, but the possibility the tree was placed in the middle of the garden was to represent the choice of what we have to do is always in the center of our lives. Yeah, so same thing you said. That's kind of just my low-life two-bit opinion as well, if I can say it like that. But that basically, sin, your choices are in the center of your life. And so here's this tree. It's beautiful. It looks great. Why couldn't it have been an ugly tree, like full of thorn and hedge apples or something? Why did it have to be something that looks good? But I just think it was sitting there, and God says, look, this looks good, but you need to trust me.
Yeah. Because the only thing that was, like you're saying, you have to have definition, so God defined it. Because I don't think that tree looked any different than any of the other trees, but God told them, this one's different.
I never thought about that. Did the tree look the same? Did it look better? Because sometimes sin can really look good to people.
What does a tree look like that makes one wise? Did she even know to make you wise until he said
Oh,
something?
no, I don't think so.
So it wasn't obvious to her that tree was any different than what the other ones were until God told them not to do it.
One of them things that makes you say,
Yeah.
I mean, things
Filled up the whole hour.
I could have, just things that you don't think about, but it's like you get to that point and you look at this, You know, there's 6 easy steps to the fall of humanity right here. And, you know, you read it and you think, why couldn't it have been off somewhere else? You know, I mean, why put it there at all? But we do have these choices, and the issue is, yes, once you know that it might sound great to have knowledge, but you got to be able to define the knowledge. And if you don't have that, again, henceforth, we get the law later because people do have the knowledge. But I guess in a world of abundance, you know, and the garden just sounds like, and I'm sure it was a very awesome place. But that doesn't mean we don't live in a world of abundance today. I mean, especially in America. You know, most people in America, no matter the poorest of us, as I've read, the richest 20% of the world, you know, I mean, the average American's just richer than almost most of the people in the world. You know, people want to be in the 1%. Well, it's on what you're comparing it to, you know, but there's lots of places where you can go where people don't have much. But in a world of abundance in nature, just the reality is there is an ever potential desire to turn it inwards. When I say that, I mean to put ourselves over others when it really doesn't even have any real effect on our lives. You know, I got to look out for me and mine. You know, that's first. And that does sound like a noble thing because a man needs to take care of his family, and you need to make sure that, you know, you like to think of yourself as a provider, and you want to make sure your family has the things that you need to get by. And it's actually a very noble thing. But, you know, and one of the problems is we want to turn all this into materialistic things. And that can be an easy place to start, especially among people, because that's what everybody thinks right away. They value somebody's worth or somebody's stature or somebody's position on how much stuff they have. You know, how many toys do you have? He who dies with the most toys wins. How many times, you all heard that. But sometimes it's not that kind of things at all that can lead to problems, because this envying, this strife, this coveting, I think is the word I'm looking for, is Cain wanted Abel's favor with God. That wasn't over. It wasn't that one had better crops or one had better this or one, I think they had different occupations, I guess, but it wasn't that his animals were nicer than his wheat fields or whatever he was growing, but he wanted God's favor. Jacob wanted Esau's blessing. And it was already all predetermined. What did he have to take that for? God already said, you know, this is going to do this and this is the way it's going to work. Did he really have to steal that? His mom was behind that too a little bit. But I point those two out because it doesn't always have to be material things that all kinds of bad things can come from. But we are people, and we do tend to worry and have anxiety, and what mindset brings these things to lead people think that there is not enough. What's 5 things that COVID made us run out of?
Toilet paper, hand sanitizer. Well, I think masks we did all right.
Well, once the mass production got up, yeah, you know, so toilet paper, hand sanitizer. It's somewhat related. There's a worldwide steel shortage. There is an automobile shortage. There's a chip shortage. Some of that's related to COVID, some of it is not. Diapers. You know, I can remember, and hey, one of the things that got me about this, I think the most, because I looked back over the last year and thought of all the stuff that I was guilty of when I started putting this into context in my mind. You know, we got a phone call. My son-in-law called me and said, he's in Korea at the time, and he said, you wouldn't believe what's going on here. I want you to go to the store tomorrow, take my wife to the store, and I want you to buy enough diapers and toilet paper and all that stuff for the next couple of months because you can't find it here now. As soon as COVID hit in South Korea, see, we think Americans are different, but we're not. When COVID hit in South Korea, that stuff flew off the shelves and you couldn't get it. And I said, really? He goes, I'm telling you, it's gone. And I don't want the kids not to have diapers and stuff like that. So we went over to Sam's Club and bought a couple, whatever diapers she thought she was going to need that would get us through a dry spell. And we bought a thing of toilet paper and one of the big, the things you get at Sam's Club. And by gosh, you know what? It all disappeared. We didn't buy 5 cases of toilet paper. We just bought the one. But I just think, it just still floors me how things, and it happened there, and it just made its, and I don't know if it's just the worldwide communication that people, know people, and they say, oh yeah, all this stuff's disappearing, and you think, man, I better go get mine. And, I'm just not going to buy one, I'm going to buy 10. I've heard stories of people that they're not going to buy any toilet paper till 2025. But, it just made people buy all this stuff because all this anxiety set in. I don't know how many of you guys can, but you can't hardly find canning lids. They're starting to come back now, but there's things that disappeared. Everybody wants to grow their own food. Now it created shortages in areas where people really never thought that it was going to happen. And it's weird, and it's all, it has to do with a mindset that, I got to get mine. When the reality of it was, if nobody would have had that mindset, it would have been fine. You would have never noticed a difference. There is do you guys know that there is a scientific mathematical formula on how much toilet paper America uses? There is, and they know exactly how much to produce in the market. And it goes by population numbers. And it never varies until last year. And it wasn't that people were using anymore, people were just buying more. But I was really surprised. I think it's a half a roll a week or something like that. You can figure for the population. It's supposed to be something like that. But I guess let's flip over to Matthew 5. Is kind of where this led me to. We're going to start in verse 38. And then we're going to skip to Luke chapter 12 because these are, the two passages are somewhat related. And they really have to do with, so, I put a story in context about Adam and Eve in the garden and what happened. And as we start thinking about how people act with abundance and how we get to viewing one another. And in Matthew 5:38 through 48, these 10 verses, we see, this is Christ talking, ye had heard it been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, ye resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn him the other also. How natural does this come to anybody? Yeah, go ahead. You want to hit me, go ahead. That doesn't come to, there is nobody that I don't know that I ever met. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there's circumstances, but this is not, I don't know of this ever happening, that anybody's got hauled off and punched and somebody just turned the other cheek, say, go ahead and hit me here. I'm sure it's happened, but there's nothing in a human being that wants to act this way because you're defensive of yourself. In verse 40, and if a man will sue thee at the law that take away thy coat, let him have your cloak also. So if somebody sues you for $100,000 and they win, you give them $200,000. You just give them your house too. That's a perfectly natural reaction. And that probably happens all the time. No, I don't think. In verse 41, and whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with thee twain. I think this out of what we've looked at so far probably has happened more, depending on how much you like the person that asked you to go the mile. But I'll bet you there's people that went with somebody a lot further than the person expected when they ask at times. I'm not saying it's common. Out of the first ones we've looked at, I think that might be the most likely to happen, unless there's a meaning to this verse that escapes me.
It's about a Roman soldier asking you to go and carry his stuff.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that could be, maybe if you really liked a soldier, you would go to it. I don't know. I'm just,
In the olden days, it'd be like a Russian telling you, like Russian soldier, or a Jew at Germany.
so this would be somebody invading your land saying, hey, carry my stuff for a mile.
Carry my stuff
And you just say, you know what, I'll carry it too for you. Okay, never mind. That probably hasn't happened then. Not naturally anyway. Give to him that asks from thee what thou would borrow, and turn him not away. Don't, if somebody needs to borrow $10, give it to him. No questions asked. Ye have heard it been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. I'll start off by saying I don't know, and I'm going to ask the crowd here, does it really, I don't think it says anywhere in the Bible to hate your enemy. Is that covered? I believe that people back then said it, and I believe people say it today, but I don't know that ever in the Bible does it say that you are to love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I don't know that God ever tells you to hate anybody. God says he hates some things, but I don't think they revolve around people, more of actions or mindsets. But there's smoke up here in the first row. Second row, touche. This isn't a natural thing. Although I do believe that there are people that are really, I know there's people in my life that I've had a lot of difficulties with that I pray for. And it isn't, Lord, please smite them down, okay? But you really do. I have in my life more than one time on several occasions prayed for people that I was having a difficult time dealing with. And one thing with this particular verse that comes to my mind is I really try to keep in mind, more than likely that person I'm having this issue with is lost. And whether or not I'm going to agree with them on the subject doesn't really matter in the end, but they need salvation. In verse 45, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sendeth the rain on the just and the unjust. Something to keep in mind when you look at God's, why do wicked people prosper? And this verse doesn't full blown go on that, but your neighbor may be an evil person, but if you want it to rain on your fields, it's going to rain on his. There's not a line that's going to prevent it. And God sends these gifts. His generosity goes to everybody when it comes to these things. It just doesn't, it rains in Russia too, or whoever somebody wants to say your enemy is. They get the same gifts that you get. And verse 46, if ye love them which loved you, what reward have ye? The publicans do the same. It's easy to be nice to anybody. It's being nice to you. Everybody does that. There's no, if you want to act that way, that's good that you do, but everybody does that. You're no different. We're supposed to be different, and this is no different than everybody else. You might do this thinking it's great, and it ties in with verse 46 or 47 and 48, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you have more than others? For even the publicans do so. Be therefore perfect as God in heaven is, as your Father in heaven, which is perfect. Being nice to just your family, your brothers and sisters, people that think like you. You know, God's generosity doesn't stop with the saved. If it did, why would they ever turn to God? If there's nothing generous there. You know, God doesn't look at, he's generous to everybody because he wants to draw everybody to him. Somebody ought to be able to find it in themselves at some point to look and think, I need that. There's generosity there that I can't explain. But we want to divvy it up in our minds and start saying, well, why is God generous to this person and not that person? But some of the things that we are asked of to do don't come naturally to us. They don't come naturally to anybody. But that's what should make us different, that we're showing this generosity, that we're sharing it, that we're doing things generously that people don't get because it doesn't come naturally to them. And it doesn't have to be done in a way that makes somebody seem weak. Meekness is not weakness. And these things can be done in a good way. Skipping over to Luke chapter 12, because we have some similar things going on here. And I'm starting in verse 14. And we're going to look at the parable of the rich fool. I forget who he was talking to here. Was it the Pharisees that came to him? I do believe it was. But in verse 14, and he said unto them, Man, who made me judge or divider over you? Take heed, and he said unto them, Take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not of the abundance of the things that he possesses. And then he spake a parable unto them, saying, A certain rich man brought forth plentiful, and he said, he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? I have no room to bestow all my fruits. And then he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will bestow all my fruits and goods, and I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, for this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that lay up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God? The parable really says a lot about possessions and how we view ourselves. You know, people think that, you know, there's all these rich people and you see them in the news and all over the place and you just think, man, they got everything. They got their own jet. They just fly wherever they want to go. And if they want to be alone, they fly to their own island. You know, how cool would it be to own your own island? Yeah. I mean, somebody's back there thinking that, that would be all right to own your own island. You can go there and just get some time away. And I bet while you're there, you don't really have to do much because you probably have a staff. But, you know, there's rising sea levels too. And I wonder how long some of them people are going to own their own island. They might get a little spot out in the Atlantic to put a flag. But that would probably be it. And, you know, and people act like, rising sea levels, this has never happened before. We're in trouble. You know what the Florida Keys are? Mm-hmm. It's a dead coral reef that used to be all underwater, and it was alive. But the sea levels went down. You know, maybe it'll turn back into a coral reef again someday. But But he covers this just saying, what, you think you got something? You ain't got anything. This guy thought he had all this stuff to the point where, man, I'm just going to pull down my barns and build bigger barns, and I'm going to put all this stuff up, and I'm set. My 401k is busting at the seams. There's nothing in life that I could possibly want anymore, and I have just got it down, and my life is set. I don't need to worry about a thing forever. Well, it turned out forever is tonight. What good did it really do you? Where did you put all this stuff up, and where are you going with it? And in verse 22, as we look on a little bit, and I say unto you, take no thought for life, what ye shall eat, neither for your body or what ye shall put on, for life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. And Christ goes on in verses 24 through 28 to talk about, think about the birds, the ravens is the one that he uses, and if you have all this, did this guy that had all this stuff put up, did it add anything to his stature when he's dead? What did it get him? Do you think they maybe put something on his tombstone that said, here lies Bob, the richest man in the cemetery? I also don't think there's anybody's tombstone that would read, I wish I'd have spent more time at work. Although maybe there is somebody out there that has that. But yeah, these things don't get you anything. But he talks about, don't put any thought into anything. Don't put any thought into what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. And in verse 29, he kind of starts all over again. Seek not what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink. Neither be doubtful of mind, for these things do the nations of the world seek after. So everybody's looking for this stuff. There's governments, there's kings, there's queens, and there's pharaohs. Everybody's looking for this stuff. Everybody's out, and they're all seeking after what, storing up goods and building this treasure and getting gold and silver and fine jewels or whatever it was they were after at that time. But he's saying, but rather ye seek the kingdom of God, for these things shall be added unto you. So everything above will be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, your Father is good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell all that ye have and give alms, and provide yourself bags which wax not old, and a treasure of heavens that faileth not. For no thief approaches, and neither moth corrupt. So don't worry about your next meal. Sell everything you have and give it all away. Okay, so to most atypical, hardworking people that get up and go to work every day, this is a lot. Sell everything you have and give it away. Don't worry about nothing. Don't worry about where you're going to sleep. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about getting clothes. How many people in America live like that? There may be a commune somewhere, but they're making money somehow. But it just doesn't seem American to think this way. No, I don't know anybody that totally thinks this way. I can think that we should. I can get a point to it. But I think this is the conclusion that I come to. And I told you, I'm not getting you on terrible early. The secret to it all really, or to sum it up, I guess, I shouldn't say the secret, to sum it up, in verses 34, 35, and 36, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Set your loins girded about, and your lights burning, that ye yourselves unto men, and wait there for the Lord, that he will return from the wedding, and when he cometh and knocketh, they may be opened unto him immediately. It isn't about having the toys. It's about the value that you put on them. And that's an easy thing to say sometimes and a hard thing to do, because when you have things, you have a responsibility to take care of those things. But if that responsibility is getting to the point to where your possessions own you instead of the other way around, would you rather have the little boat that's in the lake or the big boat that's in the driveway because you have to work to pay for it. It's neat to say you have the big boat and all the things you can go do with it, but sometimes the easiest way to turn is what is, most of the people that when Christ said things to, like I think of the rich young ruler, that's where he had all his faith. He told him to sell everything he had and give it to the poor because he knew the guy, that was his biggest issue in giving up. I don't know if Jesus really knew the guy would turn around and walk away or not, but he did. But Christ did look at him and knew that was what he held most dear in his life. He could say he lived a good life, and he can say he did this, and he could say he did that, but at the end of it, there was something he wanted to put in front of God, and that was his money. And with all the generosity God has laid around us, if everybody wasn't quite so greedy, there'd probably be a whole lot more to go around. Because you see the people poor, think not where your next meal's coming from. Do you ever think there's good people in this world, Christians, that starve to death because they don't have enough to eat, die of malnutrition? There are. Why is that? You know how much food there is in the world? What does America throw away every day? If you think about it, it's absurd. Why do some have so much where others don't? But it comes down to this mindset of, I got to get mine. And it's kind of sad. And the more impoverished area you live in some country, a lot of countries of the world, I would imagine I got to get mine is a whole lot more devastating to folks than it is in America. We're probably a little shielded from that, where there's food banks for the poorest of us that people can go get something to eat and the government mails you checks. Most countries in the world don't have that. There are quite a few that do, but most countries don't have that kind of thing. And you hear our politicians get all caught up in giving everybody money and a minimum wage and what do they call it, a basic income? Just for breathing, you should get so much money. People in America don't need that like people think that they do. I'm sure it comes in helpful for a lot of folks, but any thoughts?
Yeah, so what is the biggest threat to discontentment for a Christian?
The biggest threat to discontentment for a Christian, I think it's where you're setting your eyes. I don't know. I imagine that can be different for every single individual. But I think it's if we keep our focus on God, and it's when we start turning away, we start looking for abundance somewhere else, probably is where we're going to get into trouble, when we start thinking we don't have enough.
Is it discontentment that it's our problem, or value and what we should value?
Do those two, I think there's overlap between discontentment and value, maybe, because you do put a value on things. And you can be, that's where discontentment probably sets in. There's been times where people had no value on anything until somebody came along and started telling them how much they needed it,
So if I don't value, if I have the wrong value, so how come we don't have issues? We may look and say, why don't I have a boat, and envy the boat, but how come it's not our tendency to envy? How come I do not show more fruit of the Spirit? How come I don't ever sit down, or rarely do we sit down and say, that's my problem? Not that I don't have a boat.
Yeah, that I don't,
have the
fruit of the Spirit.
Not that my 401k, we're more apt to sit down and say my 401k is in trouble than the fruit of the Spirit in me is in trouble.
I think you're very true.
So what's the solution for that?
I'm going to put that in the next chew on this and send it to you. Why, do you have a thought on it?
Well, when you read the Old Testament prophets, prior to going to bondage, it's their sin. When they get out of bondage, it's their complacency. They come back, you would think they'd be all hungry for doing doing spiritual things, they're not in the land a couple of years. And they've got their houses, like Haggai, and Zechariah, Malachi's going to get after them, as Corey's going to tell us today. And they're complacent because they're back to where they were, and they have everything they need, and they don't care that their relationship with God is, because they've got it.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because this is going to shock you all. I was listening to some podcast when I got the thought for this, and that's one of the things that he talked about in the podcast. He talked quite a bit because the abundance that God gives, you know, I mean, there's so much that he started giving to certain groups, you know, and mainly the line of Abraham that, you know, there was an abundance that he gave to him and the generations after him, his descendants, that the rest of the world didn't get. And, you know, he said, hey, all this land's going to be yours, all this stuff. And he gave them a gift. He made them a promise to the descendants without laying, he said, you're going to get this. And it was an unconditional gift. In other words, he didn't set forth, well, you're going to get this if. He said, I'm going to give this to you guys. But then to keep it, there were things that they had to do. And once they got it, I don't know if they just felt like they had it and they didn't need to do the things they needed to do to keep it, because once they were going there, they get the law, they get all these things they're supposed to do. They build this temple. They're supposed to act a certain way toward not just each other, but to people around them, strangers in the land. And along the way, yeah, a few of the kings got it, but it was few. You know, very few. And I just had a hard time tying it all into this where I felt like I was getting off on a rabbit trail when I went into it. But yeah, he did, it's a good series of podcasts if you haven't listened to it yet. I'd encourage you. It's on generosity. Yeah. Yeah, because I thought it was going to be more on generosity, and it really, when I started, and it kind of started that way a little bit, listening to it, but once you get more into it, it's not so much about generosity, it's so much about, it really gets more into the problem with generosity, and that is our attitude toward abundance. Yeah. That how we, you know, when God is generous and God does give people all these things, how we act toward it, you know, and how we deal with it, and how do we use it? Do we share it? Do we share God's abundance to everybody, or do we think, man, my room ain't full, I got to fill up my barn, I got to build a bigger barn, you know, I need another case of toilet paper, I need whatever, you know, yeah. It really turned into a little bit more of that, and that's where I started getting off on the rabbit trails a little bit. But, okay, would you close in prayer?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for all that you've given to us, and as Paul told Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain. And so, Lord, you know our struggles as Midwestern men, great work ethics, have goals, work towards those goals, but Lord, sometimes I think we misplace our values, and we do go to covetousness, which can lead to complacency. So Lord, help us to stay spiritually focused, and help us to understand where the true treasure lies. And I think, Lord, the word we need to meditate on is, you told us we're pilgrims and strangers